Welcome to our virtual summer book series with the Georgia Center for the Book, Joshilyn Jackson Reads. I'm Matwan Howard, the board president for the Decatur Book Festival. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our friends at the Georgia Center for the Book for their generous partnership, and the DeKalb Library Foundation and the DeKalb County Public Library for their longtime support of the festival. I would also like to take a moment to thank Decatur Book Festival donors whose support we rely on each year, as well as our major sponsors, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Emory University, WABE, MailChimp, City of Decatur, Agnes Scott College, Georgia Humanities, and the DeKalb Entertainment Commission. I'm excited to share some news. I want to share what's happening this fall. Well, first of all, we're going to have a new weekend. The first weekend in October. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so we decided to shake things up. This year, we will be sharing our weekend with 3 other Decatur festivals: Amplify Decatur, the Decatur Arts Festival, and the Decatur Beer Festival. Now, I don't want to hear any jokes about books and beer. They go together. For the Decatur Book Festival's portion of the weekend, we will host a focused program of 5 authors in the sanctuary of the First Baptist Church of Decatur. This program will honor our commitment of showcasing an array of voices at the festival throughout the year and connecting readers with writers and encouraging empathy through the love of reading and creative expression. As part of our ongoing mission to share literature with people no matter their circumstances, we have partnered with the local Books to Prison nonprofit, X Books, by contributing 20 signed copies of tonight's featured book to the Metro Reentry Facility here in Atlanta. 20 of the program's participants are joining us, and we are so pleased to share the program with them. Welcome. This evening's featured author, of course, is Stacey Abrams, here to discuss her new thriller, While Justice Sleeps. Stacey will be in conversation with our own Joshilyn Jackson, the author of 9 books herself, including this year's Mother May I. If you'd like to continue the work of the Decatur Book Festival, you can donate through the link in the chat. We would really appreciate that. So I'd just like to say thanks again for joining us tonight. We're so excited about this amazing conversation, and I'll turn it over to Joshilyn. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I am wildly excited to talk to Stacey Abrams in just a minute. I'm sure most of you have heard of her or know who she is, but I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Stacey before she comes on. She is the 2-time New York Times bestselling author of Our Time Is Now and Lead from the Outside. She's also an entrepreneur, and some of you might know that she is a political figure. That may have occurred to you. She's a tax attorney, though, by training, and she served 11 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, 7 as minority leader. In 2018, she was the Democratic nominee for governor, and she got more votes than any Democratic nominee in the history of the state. She's launched multiple organizations that are devoted to voting rights and to training and hiring young people of color and tackling social issues at the state, national, and international levels. She's the founder of Fair Fight, Fair Count, and the Southern Economic Advancement Project. She's received her degrees from Spelman College, the LBJ School of Public Affairs, University of Texas, and Yale Law School. And now she adds really good thriller writer to her massive list of amazing accomplishments. Please join me in welcoming Stacey Abrams.
Thank you, Joshilyn, for a very kind introduction.
I am so happy to be talking with you about this. I warned you before, but I'm going to warn everyone who's here. This book will attack me at some point. It keeps jumping off the shelf. It's the sign of a book I really liked because it's so manhandled. If I was going somewhere, I'd be like, "Ooh, I'll be in the waiting room for at least 15 minutes. I can get a few more pages in." I could not put this down.
Thank you.
So I'm going to tell everybody how we're going to do this. I know everybody's eager to ask their own questions. I'm going to ask you to do just a couple of things. If you've had the pleasure of reading this book already, please no spoilers. Like, don't tell the end. Don't ruin it for other people. I know you're excited about it, but ask your questions in such a way that Stacey can answer them without giving away stuff for the people who still have it to look forward to. I'm also going to mostly be looking for questions in the question and answer section. So if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you see participants, Q&A, chat, share screen. Choose Q&A and put your questions there. The chat is if you see somebody you know, or you just want to say, hey, Stacey, love the book, or whatever you want to do. And I'll be kind of monitoring that too. But mostly for questions, I'm going to look in the question and answer section. So we will get to your questions in a minute. First, Stacey, just for those who haven't read it yet, give us the hook. Tell us a little bit about the book.
So it is the story of a young law clerk. She's clerking for the swing vote on the Supreme Court. And she comes to work one day to find out that he is in a coma, and he has appointed her as his legal guardian who has the right to decide whether he lives or dies. She has to make this decision. And as she tries to unravel his wishes, she realizes she's become embroiled in an international scandal and has to save his life and the country.
As you do when you're a 26-year-old law clerk. Avery is, so one of the things that I think as women writers, we're under a lot of pressure to make our main characters really likable. And I always say, I don't care if the character is likable as long as they're interesting, but you did something really cool here, and that like this is a person who gets embroiled in this big spooky thing, but she's also somebody I would want to go and have coffee with. How did you create Avery?
The day I thought of the book, I was having lunch with a terrific friend. Her name is Teresa Wynn Roseborough. If you're from Georgia, you may have heard of her. She's an attorney, amazing woman. And she gave me the idea. We were having lunch. She had been a very strong supporter of mine when I was a young lawyer at the firm where she was a partner. And she would always feed me little tidbits of things she'd been thinking of. And she said, have you ever thought about this quirk in the Constitution that the only people who have a lifetime appointment have no provision for removing them if they are physically unable to do the job? And I'm like, huh. And I could not stop thinking about that. So I went home and I wrote the first scene. And in writing that scene, the opening prologue, Justice Wynn talks about Avery. And when I started thinking about her, I wanted her to be someone that he would have grudging admiration for, but that she would be someone who was interesting, but a little closed off, that she wanted to do what was right, but she had all of her own stuff to deal with. And I just kept trying to think of myself at 26, like, who did I wish I had been? I don't wish for her life, but I thought about the way, and my favorite people when I was 26, like what were they like? And so she's a conglomeration of folks I know and things I wish I'd known, or person I wish I'd been when I was that person.
And there's a little bit of overlap. I mean, you both went to Yale, so you definitely drew on your own experience a little bit. How much of you is in Avery? Or is that a question that as an author, you can even really know how much of yourself is in a character?
I mean, she went to Spelman. She went to Yale.
Oh, that's true. She went to Spelman and Yale. And you did.
I never clerked for the Supreme Court, never had any interest in it. I have a family that I love that has complicated challenges. So there's that. And I really did want to deal with the conversation about addiction, and not in a superficial or one-dimensional way. And so that was important to me with her mother, Rita. I have a younger brother who's been grappling with addiction for years. And I also love the notion of the family you're born to and the family you build. And so I've been, very privileged to have this extraordinary set of siblings, but also this, very core group of friends who've been with me for now nearly 30 years. And I think in those ways we are alike, but she's also, she's her own person. And I think we project what we want, but we also try to, it's free therapy. We can, we can offload some of our own neuroses onto our characters. And I'm not going to talk about which neuroses of hers are mine.
That's completely fair. I would like to say that Janelle in chat has said Spelman. So you have somebody who is a fellow graduate, I'm guessing, here tonight. So you mentioned her mother, Rita. A thing that I found just really compelling that was a tension raiser that ran through the whole book is that Avery doesn't come from the silver spoon in the mouth background. Like her mother is a liability in a lot of ways, and in really subtle ways that sort of up the tension for me. We're given to understand that this is a person who has this extraordinary chance. She's talented, she's hardworking, she's likable, and she has this extraordinary chance, but it's one chance. And it's like there are lots of people that get like 20 or 30 chances or 100 chances or all the chances they need. This is her shot. And like, obviously you did that on purpose, but I think is this important to you? Can you talk about that aspect of the book a little bit?
Absolutely. I was on a panel once, and one of the people on the panel said, there are people in this world who get as many, times at bat as they want. And there are those of us who we strike out, we're done. We don't just strike out, we get ejected from the game. And that is so often the groups of people I end up working with and that I try to serve in my my other life as an advocate or a politician, those for whom there are no second chances, or at least the notion of a second chance is very remote and you can't risk it. Like, yes, it is entirely possible that Avery could have another shot, but she has no guarantee. And the desperation that follows that, the urgency that follows that is something I felt that when I finished law school and my family, we were very economically, precarious. I was the first one with real money and I couldn't make mistakes. I couldn't stumble and cost us this one opportunity. And I have amazing siblings who are all going to do well eventually, but you don't know it for sure. And the sense of responsibility, I think, is one part of what I wanted to imbue in her character. But I also wanted to just create space for anyone else who's thinking about, do I take risk? Like what is at stake and what am I willing to, jeopardize to do what I think is right?
Yeah. That was another way that, I mean, I found this book to be really compelling because the tension wasn't just on the level. I mean, there's real tangible, like physical, you can die in this book, danger, but there was also all this tension just coming from the level of the characters. And to me, this was a really character driven book, which I think when you are setting something on, this is an international stage with huge stakes, it's really hard to stay character based, but this was. And there were things that I really enjoyed. Like, she has a girlfriend, Ling, who has been her friend for, since they were she's still very young to me, I guess, but they have been they kind of have this really serious friendship. And Ling is, she kind of seems like just a little bit of a support character at first, but she becomes more and more important. And that relationship becomes more and more important. And to see these women supporting each other, I found that really heartening. Is that something you wanted to do, or was that just something that's your experience from life, or where did Ling come from?
So Ling is based in part on one of my best friends. We've known each other since college, and in with very different lives. But she has always been someone I could turn to and rely on. But she also, will call me on things and will not. We have to have those friends who know us so well that they are incredibly honest, sometimes more honest than we want them to be. And that's the part that I wanted Ling to play in this story, because as you said, it's a very tight timeline. And I wanted to tell a story that was both thriller and I want characters that you like, that you, or at least that you, to your point, that you find interesting. And Ling was one of those characters where sometimes you have to shorthand the story and you can't do all of the backstory and how they met. And you have 2 scenes to really explain why she's willing to do something, 30 pages or 150 pages in. And I wanted us to understand from their few interactions, like why Ling was ride or die. And that, to me, those are the people that I hold close, the ones who know me and like me anyway. And I wanted someone like that for Avery.
Yeah, that rang really true for me. Like that was so true for me. Like I knew I could see that relationship. We're going to talk about 2 more characters really quick, and then I'm going to have to let I'll have to let somebody else ask a question, even though I have about 15 more, but there's 2 I have to ask. The first is about another minor character. Let's talk about Matt. Um, in fact, before you guys all came in, we were all kind of sitting talking about Matt a little bit. Matt, will you tell them a little bit about Matt, and then I'll ask you my Matt question.
I'd like to hear your description of Matt, actually.
Oh, well, Matt is that guy who he's like a shark. He never sleeps. He just eats and poops other people. Super ambitious, really kind of coasting on his connections, really pleased with his mediocrity. I've worked with several Matts, and there's one scene where like that we were talking about, I don't want to spoil it, but where you kind of let your character deliberately make a decision to be like, you know what, Matt, and it was so satisfying for me. That must have been so satisfying for you to write.
It was a lot of fun. We all know Matt, and I've been to school with them, I've worked with them, and you recognize that they have a place in the ecosystem of the universe, but you don't have to like it. You may have to tolerate it, you may have to navigate it, but when the universe offers you an opportunity to speak on behalf of the rest of the world, Avery believed that she had to take it, and it was well worth it.
Yeah, it sure was well worth it for me. That was very enjoyable. Just a little bit of the universe. It was just a little bit of, I try not to indulge in Schadenfreude, but he's fictional, so you get to, and you can feel okay about yourself. I want to talk just briefly about the Supreme Court. There are two characters that, even though Justice Wynn is not really very present because, it's not a spoiler, it's on the back of the book, almost immediately he's taken out of the game, and Avery gets his power of attorney that lands this young legal mind in a lot of hot water. But he is a hard character to get a handle on. Like the man, I thought it was really well done that we have this very curmudgeonly, brilliant, judgmental maverick, on the court, who spends the whole book, or not the whole book, but it's certainly I don't want to say what happens to him during the whole book, but it's not like we get to meet him for a very long time before he's removed from the action. And yet through all these interactions with the Chief Justice, with Avery's memories, with other people's memories, we come to really see him as a whole person. And he is one of those that I talk about, male characters often have this luxury where he's not terribly likable, but he is incredibly interesting. And maybe some things happen that mitigate some of his choices as we go along. But how hard was it to make a character to be that fascinating, that multi-layered and brilliant, but he doesn't suffer fools or just regular smart people? Like, you really need to be playing your A game to sit down to tea with this guy.
So there's a line in the book that actually borrowed from something said to me once by not a similar person, but someone who had composite characteristics. They told me I was a victim of imprecise thinking. And I'm like, like, I think you insulted my parents and me. But what I realized later on, after I got past my peak and my anger and my annoyance and saying inappropriate things about his parentage, I realized, here's what he was trying to say to me in this moment when he used that phrase. And so for this character, I wanted Avery to have to choose to help him. If he was too likable, if he was a mentor who was kind and generous, of course she would do everything. If he was a complete and utter jerk, then his utility wouldn't really make much sense, because that kind of person you wouldn't trust that their decisions mattered. I needed him to be interesting enough and difficult enough that she had to make an affirmative decision to try to help him. That it wasn't out of guilt, it wasn't out of love, it wasn't out of obligation, it was a choice. Because for women characters in particular, I find that sometimes what you see is that they're put into jeopardy, and it's not really a choice to do what they want. It's they either do the right thing or they die. You either do the right thing or something horrific and irredeemable happens. I wanted a character in Avery who made the affirmative choice to do it because it was what she thought she needed to do. And she had to have a foil in Justice Wynn who made it a hard decision.
That's really, I mean, that didn't occur to me. The mechanics of that didn't occur to me, which is weird for me as a novelist because I'm usually looking at mechanics, but I was so swept up in the story, I didn't even think about it, but that's really smart. I do want to say that the 20 guys at the Metro Reentry Facility are here and they say hi and they're really happy to be here.
Thank you.
We're going to take some questions and answers. We're going to start with Dagmar, who, this is a good question. Well, Dagmar has two really good questions, and we're going to do both because one of them is a question that I had planned to ask, so I get to sneak it in there, even though we really need to let other people talk too. Stacey, are you planning any more stories about Avery K? She's such a great character. Thank you, Dagmar. Really enjoyed the book.
Well, Dagmar, thank you. And I am certainly thinking about it, trying to figure out, got these other lives I lead, and these are long books, but Avery is alive and well, and I think she's coming back.
Oh, good. I'm excited. I love the idea of a series. There's certainly a lot of places you can go with her. And Dagmar also wants to know if you are a chess player. So there is a thread in the book where chess moves and chess games are sort of an overarching metaphor for the action and the strategizing and sort of these brilliant legal minds making these moves against each other and looking ahead, and like actual specific chess moves are referenced that you can look up and they're like, it's a whole big thing. If you liked Queen's Gambit, which I love, this is sort of an aspect that is very interesting to most people right now. So are you a chess player?
I am. So I actually taught myself to play chess by reading books about chess, including reading about all these chess strategies. No one I knew played chess when I was growing up. And so I learned to play it, and I taught my younger brother, Walter. And so he and I would play chess together. But I wrote this book before I knew about the Queen's Gambit, although the book predates my book. I did not read it. For me, the chess motif was really important because it was something I taught myself. And I learned about chess from learning the history of chess and learning the stories and the just the strategies. And I was always fascinated by these gambits, these ways of thinking about how do you navigate. And so when I got ready to write this book, it was a great opportunity for me to use all the nerdy chess information that was in my head. I am not a great player by any stretch of the imagination. I've rarely played other humans. I mainly play chess online, but I do love a game.
That's cool. So Heather Morse is here, and apparently she is also a Ling fan. And also, I don't think it's a spoiler because I think it's like chapter 3. You learn very soon that a big genetics research corporation in India is going to be playing a big part in this book. And she wants to know, like, who did you have consult on the medical stuff? Because there was a lot of stuff that was pretty in depth, and you are a lawyer, not a doctor. So how did you do that?
I do really, really deep research. So for my romance novels, for my nonfiction, for this book, I spend a lot of time teaching myself as much as I can learn online. And once I kind of have a conceit that I'm going to use, I do as deep a dive as I can. And then I talk to people. So for this, I had friends, mainly my sister, my youngest sister, Janine. So I've got 5 brothers and sisters, and they are better than Google. And they are, but they're also great references, and they're free. So I can just call and say, I'm going to do this thing. Is this stupid? So once I figured out what I wanted to do, I called Janine to get some advice on some of the medical pieces. She used to work for the CDC. She's an evolutionary biologist. There's a whole thing in there about about DNA, but also the question of identity and how do we decide not just where we're from, but what that means. And my older sister is an anthropologist, so I called her. My sister Leslie's a real lawyer. I just play one on TV, so I called her about some stuff. I called my brothers to ask them to bounce ideas off of them. So I really just had a whole background singers group of people helping, but I do all of my own research, in part because you want to write a story that, especially one that uses as many topics as I was trying to use in this story, where someone believes you and someone who actually knows about the topic doesn't think you're an idiot. So, no one's going to think I'm an expert, but you're going to at least know that I respect those who do this for a living, and I respect the importance of accuracy, or driving up as close to it as I can get without actually going to medical school.
Yeah, well, I respect that. So this is not from the question and answer section, this is from the chat, but I have to ask it. Emily, who is 9 and likes to write, wants to know if you ever find it hard to come up with a solution for the problems you create for your characters in your book.
Oh, Emily, yes, I do. I once had a book where my character was supposed to go onto a cliff, and she's supposed to go into a cave, and she was on a cliff for like 3 days. I had no idea how she got out there. And I'm like, what is she doing? And finally I realized why she was on the cliff, and I was able to write that into the story. But sometimes, and it sounds disembodied, like I've got challenges, but I'm sure, Joshilyn, that you understand this, that there are these things, you try to create a universe for your characters, and you try to make sure you know them. But part of the fun in writing is that they tell you what they're going to do. And sometimes it's not what you thought was going to happen. And the best writers, I think, are the ones who let the characters lead you. You don't let them take over, because if they take over, you'll find yourself, not on a cliff or a cave, but you find yourself in the ocean and nobody knows how to swim. You'll do something really, wrong. But I try my best to let my characters do what I've created them to do. And I like to be surprised by what they decide.
I think that's really true, because that's like your subconscious mind at work. And I find if I don't let them do what they really want to do, I'm not writing the actual book. I end up throwing it away. Emily has a quick follow-up that I think is a really great question. How do you think, as the creator of her, that Avery motivated herself to do the right thing?
When I was creating Avery, so if you think about her mom and her dad, there was a time when her family was happy. There was a time before her mother became an addict. And one of the reasons I tell the story of Avery's mom is that I don't want people to see addiction and mistakes as permanent parts of who a person is. People make mistakes. And addiction is a disease, and it's hard, and recovery doesn't mean you're never going to relapse. It just means you are working hard not to. And I say that because to raise a child like Avery, you have to give her a set of core values. And those values don't disappear because her mother was not the woman she should have been or wanted to be, and that her father was gone. I wanted Avery to have enough of a sense of herself and to have enough of a view of the world that she thought that doing right, even if it's hard, that it's necessary.
It is hard. It's almost always hard. Maybe that's just me.
No, I would attest. It is very hard.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear you say that. Oh, we have some questions from the men at the Metro Reentry Facility. And so I'm going to ask you a few of those. Some of them have already been asked. So this one's really interesting, and one I wanted to know too. What inspired you to write about justice in terms of your main focus? Was it the court system or the people?
Both. So my younger brother has not only grappled with drug addiction, he's grappled with incarceration. And I come from a very big family from Southern Mississippi, and I've got a lot of family members who have been in and out of the carceral system. But more importantly, I know some have deserved the process and some have been battered by it and were mistreated by it. As someone who studied law, I know that there are broken pieces. And as someone who was in the legislature, helping write some of these laws and doing my best to defeat other laws, I've always been unable to separate the two, because we don't have justice in the abstract. Justice applies to people. We are making choices about what consequences are, but also what the quality of humanity is. And for me, those two things are so inextricably linked that the story has to deal with both pieces. And that's why, I have some characters who don't have as much nuance or dimension as I would have liked, but it was important to have a story that really shows that there are some good people, there are some bad people, and there's some people in between who have to decide which side they're going to land on.
Yeah. I think the book does a really good job of, and this is like, for me and for a lot of writers, this is like hashtag goals. Like, this is what we want to do, where you really are invested in telling a story that anybody can like take down to the beach and have a drink and be wholly absorbed and not turn the pages. But at the same time, you want them to go away like thinking about stuff that's true about the world around them, or see something in a new perspective. And I loved that this would be a really good book club book, because it's not just a thriller. It's a thriller that is sort of aimed at the heart of there's some, I don't want to say, I can't say there, you deal with some really topical stuff that we can't talk about because it's big twists and super interesting. But if you want to know what those twists are, I tell you what you can do. Karis Books and More still has a few signed copies left of Stacey's book. I know you bought one to enter, but this is going to be a great teacher gift. This is a great best friend gift. This is a great book to get for like the person who does all the stuff to run your book club, you know, that person who without them, it would never happen. And because it's also a book you're going to want to talk about. So you need to give it to your friend and then let your friend read it. And then you'll have somebody to talk about it with. So go ahead and call Karis Books and More. Also, Karis is one of our flagship indies. It's the lesbian feminist bookstore here. You're a fan?
Karis has been an amazing friend. Karis was in my district when I was a state representative.
Yeah, I used to live within walking distance of it when it was in Little Five Points, and it was just my neighborhood.
You voted for me.
But yeah, I did. I don't think I was old enough to vote at that point. I was very young.
Nice.
But I would have.
Well, thank you.
So let me ask you this one more from the fellows that no, you already answered that one. This is a little more looking at, we've talked about this a little bit, but this is obviously another chess player. There's a maneuver called the Lasker Bauer. Am I saying that right?
That's it. Mm-hmm.
And what about that maneuver made you choose it over the many chess gems you could have chosen? Like, why that one? Because it really is an overarching thing that runs through the whole book, that one move.
So without giving away too much, one of the points of the Lasker Bauer maneuver is this willingness to sacrifice not the most important piece, but also not to sacrifice a pawn. You end up sacrificing a pivotal piece, and with the notion that if you do that, if you are willing to take that risk, better things will happen. You can eventually win. And part of the narrative of the story is who's being sacrificed and at what cost. And so, but also one of the first strategies I learned about, when I was teaching myself chess, when I was reading all of these stories about chess stratagems, I remembered Lasker Bauer. And so when I started writing this book, it was one of the ones that came back to me, and I'm like, ooh, that's a great way to frame the story. And so I'm not the first one to do it. Other people have done it, but I like the way I did it in this book.
I do too. And I loved, you did this really clever, it's just a little tiny couple of paragraphs in the book, but when you talk about the evolution of the queen in chess, I loved that. That's a thing that just stuck with me. Melanie Loves says, Stacey, I started the book a few days ago and I'm really enjoying it. And she's glad that you're here talking to us tonight. And she loved the profile of you in the New York Times. And she was really taken by how much research in different areas you had to do in order to write this book. It's really true. I mean, it's really true. There's so many threads. Like, I don't know if this is a legal thriller. It's like if a legal thriller and a political thriller had a really fun baby. That's what it is. And so you had to research the Supreme Court, international business. What was it like to gather so much information? Like, how do you process that much information and then create specific realistic details in all those different areas to form a cohesive narrative?
So let's start with the baseline. I am a big old nerd. I just am. And when I was growing up, before my mother and father became ministers, my mom was a research librarian. When she told you to go look something up when you had a question, it was not a joke. There was a whole library for you to use. And I've always loved gathering information and really immersing myself. My romance novels, so Selena Montgomery is my alter ego as a romance novelist. I read about cognitive science and spent like 3 weeks like immersed in this website from MIT and then getting all these books on it. I read about ethnobotany. Like, I like knowing new stuff. And this was a love opportunity for me to think about these different pieces and then just not go down a rabbit hole, but really just immerse myself and learn about topics that I care about. I've got a pretty good memory and I'm a really good note taker. And so when it came time to weave them together, it was, for me, it was a fun part of doing this. I love writing in part because I love learning new things and living vicariously through my characters. And that means that I do it best if I really understand who they are and what they would be like if these were the things they did for a living.
Um, I think one of the best things a writer can do is just stay curious, and you strike me as a very curious person. So Tara Coit says, it took me 5 years to write a nonfiction book. Tara, I'm feeling you. And I can't imagine writing fiction. And you've had 2 books on the New York Times bestseller list already. And she wants to know what's easier for you, but you've also written romance novels and now your first thriller. What's easier, nonfiction or fiction? What's faster and how is it different?
They've always, I don't compare them because it's just a different part of my brain. So the reason I have a pseudonym for my romance novels was I was writing my first romance novel on chemical physics and microzeolite technology in a romance novel at the same time that I was writing
Right.
I was writing about the operational dissonance of the unrelated business income tax exemption. I had to get both of those things done. One was my master's thesis and the other was this romance novel I was writing. And for my brain, they coexist. The through line is its storytelling. And Joshilyn, you know this. It's about, and Tara, it's about being able to get people from point A to point B without losing them along the way. And so whether you're trying to convince people that they care about the unrelated business income tax, or you're trying to get them to learn about haplogroups in, your love child of a romance, of a, legal thriller and political thriller.
I'm going to pick B if that's okay.
The goal is to tell enough of a story that people care about who's in it. And I think that's, for me, the sort of fulcrum around which I write. I'm a pretty fast writer in either direction because I'm usually procrastinating, and I've learned from over years to write fast to make up for the fact that I was slow to get started. And because I like doing so many different things, it all kind of works together. And that is a very satisfying answer, I know, but that's how it works for me.
Well, Michael had a follow-up question just while you're talking about it really quick. Like, do you have to work to keep those separate? Is there ever any bleed, or is it like I have nonfiction brain, I have fiction brain on? Are you getting into different headspaces, or is it an easy, like a gear shift?
It's a gear shift. I mean, I read, when I read books, I read both fiction and nonfiction at the same time. So right now I have a couple of fiction works I'm reading and a couple of nonfiction works I'm reading, and I might read from both of them in the same night. I might read one for a few days and go back to the other. But for me, it's about learning something, sometimes learning from my heart, sometimes learning from my head, sometimes learning from my soul.
So Nicki Salcedo is here. She's my co-host in the Joshilyn Jackson Reads series. She is a romance novelist and my neighbor. She lives here in Decatur and we go to the same church. And Nicki, she's another romance novelist, and she said, you've had a long fiction career. How has your interest in happily ever after changed over the years? And for this book, was it hard to balance reality and optimism, because nobody wants to read, a thriller where it's like, and then the main character died slowly and painfully and the world was blown up and the puppy starved. Like, that's not what we're here for. So how do you balance the realities that you really do face head on in this book with, an optimism and a character that you can really like and invest in?
So I wrote romantic suspense, which meant, first of all, I got to kill a lot of people in my books. I even have a serial killer romance novel. But because all of my romances were driven both by happily ever after, but also by tension and suspense, I learned early on how to strike that balance. And, it took some time, because my first few, and Nicki will appreciate this, the first few editor's notes I got on my first few books, please make them like each other. This is a romance novel. Can you do a little more romance? I'm like, fine, whatever. Yes. Here, they like each other. Yeah. So But I mean, I love romance, but it's harder to write romance for me than it is to write the thriller piece. And as I built my chops as a romance novelist, part of it is it's not just about optimism. It's about the realism of falling in love. That the best romance novels, they had to work at it. They had to learn to like each other, and they had to learn that they fall in love, but they had to learn to like one another. And when you can navigate that in a romance novel and do it in such a way that people are willing, as Nicki knows, to come back again and again, they know how. I mean, they know how the story's going to end. Making it interesting the whole way through is a skill set that when you move over to thrillers, it's a bit of a relief, because you could just kill everybody and you're good.
I wrote Southern fiction for like a decade and a half, and then I've recently been writing thrillers, and it's so true. I get to kill more people. It's great. With you, you're a writer after my own heart. Carol Hahn says this would make a great film, and she wants to know if you could control the world, who would you cast as Avery?
Well, I will tell you, I actually have sold the rights to working title / NBC Universal, and they're turning it into a television series.
Oh,
so I can't pick who it is because that's now somebody else's job. I will get to be a part of the decision making, but I'm not going to prejudice the process.
Do you want to? I mean, do you want to be part of the decision making process, or is it kind of this thing where, I don't know, I always think like, I never think people actually make the book. It's like an artist in another medium almost having a conversation with my book. Like, how much control do you want? I'm sorry, this is just me being interested.
No, absolutely. So I've discovered the world of producing. So going down a rabbit hole, but I did a documentary last year, and I'm working on my book, Never Tell, my serial killer romance novel, is in development for another TV series. And what I've discovered is I need to know what you're doing. I don't need to be in charge of it. And I think that's sometimes a tension for writers. Mm-hmm. I'm good with you not being wholly faithful to the story as long as you're faithful to the soul. Meaning that to make some things that are literary work on screen, we've seen how bad it can be when you try to be faithful.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's not good. And so you want to give a screenwriter the flexibility to take the context and the texture and convert it. But I need you to do it right. Mm-hmm. And since my name is going to be on it and people are going to know it came from my thing, I'm not going anywhere. But I'm going to work very closely with you with respect for the fact that I'm not the screenwriter, I'm not the director, I'm not the actor, but I am here. So,
well, Janelle George has a related question because you only really have about 17 high profile serious jobs. You could become a TV producer, like super hands-on in your copious spare time. Janelle wants to talk about how you juggle everything as a writer, as a person in politics, as an advocate. How's that work? How do you find time to sit down and write a book?
So I talk about this actually in my book, Lead from the Outside. No, look, I have a whole chapter. It's called Work-Life Jenga, because work-life balance is a lie. It is a lie from the pits of hell. And we hear about it, and we hear that we're supposed to be able to balance. You use the word juggle. That is a perfect metaphor. But I use Jenga because I have these different pieces of me, and I'm not willing to sacrifice any of them. But I realize that sometimes I need some things that are just stable enough that they always exist. And there are pieces I can pull out and I can move around and I can reset them. But I also know that I'm going to pull out the wrong piece and the whole thing is just going to come crashing down. And the great thing about Jenga is it's going to crash. So the job is just to rebuild it. So for me, I build in writing. I know that I love writing. I know that there are stories I want to tell. But I have books that I've never finished, that I've started and I'm midway through, and one day I'll get back to them. But I have other books that people either wanted to buy, my romance series, and then there was While Justice Sleeps. I wanted to write this story, so I wrote it. Nobody was going to buy it for a decade, but I had to tell it. And so for me, it's just figuring out where the book fits on that spectrum. And spectrum is not like that, it's like that. But it's figuring out where the book fits, and then making all the other pieces of who I am and what I need fit in as well. And the last thing I'll say is this. There are things that are urgent and important, like democracy. There are things that are There are things that are important, like writing. There are things that are urgent, like democracy. And so my job is to figure out sort of which thing. There are things that are not urgent or important. That's, me getting to, being a television producer. It'd be great, but it's not urgent or important. My job is to focus as much as I can on those top two pieces, and when I can to dip into the other spaces, but to never let those go awry. And
Yeah.
again, there's democracy.
And I mean, the truth is, though, like, if you were to spend 20 hours a day fighting for democracy, you would very soon burn out and just need to go sit down. Like, there's things you have to do to renew yourself. Do you find writing to be a thing that, like, there's things that you have to feed and there's things that feed you? Is writing a thing you feed or a thing that feeds you, or both?
It's both. And probably the same is true for you. And I want to give credit. The urgent and important taxonomy is actually from Dwight D. Eisenhower, in case anyone's looking it up, or worse, in case someone's fact checking me. I know I didn't come up with it. I just use it as a framework. So, but as you know, like when you have a contract, they either want the book or their money back. There's nothing really relaxing about
Reasonable.
like, I'm like, the money's gone. I'm like, so I got to produce a book. That said, I enjoy the process of writing. I enjoy it better when it's done. And, I build in days to my calendar for days where I'm supposed to write and I'm not gonna. And so if it takes me 35 or 45 days to write, I will add 50 days to my calendar, 5 days for like the day I hate the English language and don't ever want to use it again. The day where I, bemoan my life choices and I don't want to do this. And, if I sell my kidney, I can pay them their money back, so you build in your days and then the rest of the time you've got to get it done. But I love writing. It's part of who I am, and there's no way for me to not have it. But I also watch an inordinate amount of television. I read voraciously, and I love, movies.
Well, I will say that I have long been an admirer of yours, but you are a nerd, and I fell in love with you when you tweeted that Buffy obviously grew up and should be with Spike. Yes. So Janelle George is the one who asked about juggling everything, and I just wanted to tell Janelle specifically, and all the rest of you, that if you want to Lead from the Outside and hear more about that, Karis Books can hook you up, and you will be supporting a flagship indie here in Atlanta. And while we're on the topic of like, you have books finished and waiting and this or that is going to happen, Trina Love is a big Selena Montgomery fan. And she says there were 3 women. You wrote novel for 2 of them. Is one of the unfinished books that third one?
Julia's story is coming, I promise. So in my defense, I was under contract to HarperCollins. I wrote, and the contract was for 2 books, with an option for a third, and it was Reckless and Deception. Finn, so I did Kel and I did Finn. In 2010, when we were negotiating the next contract, they wanted me to be on. So any of the romance novelists who are listening understand this. They want me on a faster production schedule. That was around the time I started a new company. I became minority leader, and Democrats were imploding. And so I was like, I can't really commit to doing more. And they said, either you do all of these things, or, I mean, it was a negotiation. They're like, we need you to do this, or we don't want to move forward. And I'm like, okay. And I wasn't important enough for them to like care about it. They liked my books, but I wasn't like setting the world on fire. So I kind of got distracted. And hopefully you've noticed I've not been twiddling my thumbs, but because I would like to be able to move freely around Atlanta and to visit some of my friends who also have this gripe, I promise you, I don't know exactly when, but soon Julia's story will be told.
All right. Now this is being recorded, so now you are pot committed. This is a really interesting question that would never have occurred to me, Paula. Thank you. She says most of your characters have names derived from several sources, but there are 2 characters whose names are familiar to people in Georgia. Why did you decide to use those names for these characters? I don't want to spoil it, but you use some real names, Porter and David Ralston, that these are real names.
So I started writing, I wrote While Justice Sleeps when I was in the legislature. When I started the book, David Ralston was the chair of the Judiciary Committee on which I sat, and he was a really good chair. He was a good guy who we disagreed politically, but he was fair. And when I became leader, we disagreed vehemently about many things, but we were able to work together on important issues. And one of the things I like to do is use the names of people I liked. And there are things I had to accomplish as leader, and I was very successful in them. And it was because, I mean, it's in my title, it was minority leader. I wasn't going to get anything done if I couldn't find a way to work with the other side.
Yeah.
And I appreciate him. I mean, David and I disagree on a lot of things, but he was always, he was someone I could work with, and he's my friend. DuBose Porter was my predecessor, as he was the leader before I was. And it's DuBose's fault that I ended up just thinking I could be the leader. And he taught me how to think about Georgia as a full state, and that I wasn't elected as an Atlanta city representative. I was elected as a Georgia state representative. And it's why I made it my mission when I became leader to went to 150 counties, eventually went to all 159 when I ran for governor. And DuBose was one of those people who really helped me understand and think most broadly about the role we play, that what's good for my community in a small way is not necessarily what we need for the state. And it's an important job to be able to think about both and not just the singular.
Dagmar says, I read that book so fast. I missed David Ralston in there. You know what? You can read it again, Dagmar. It's worth a second read. There's a lot of nuanced stuff going on in there. And it is one of those books that, and I'm a rereader because if it's got a plot, I read it so fast because I just have to eat it. I'm a gobbler. Oh, Nicki Salcedo has another question that I think is great. God, Nicki's such a great interviewer. Stories can bring different kinds of people to a common understanding. Do you ever hear from people who are changed by your writing, but they're surprised they like your stuff?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's part of it.
It's a little bit of a double-edged thing.
Yeah. But look, whether it's my politics, my advocacy, my business work, my writing, I'm not a proselytizer. I try to be someone who tells you why this makes sense and why I'm doing it. And I try to create space for you to come inside and join me. When you write in a way that tells a story where people can find themselves, they may not find themselves in the whole piece, but if they can find enough that it gives them comfort or entertainment or joy, then I've done my job. When I was writing romance, there's a group of men who used to send me a note after they read my novels. They called themselves the Brown Paper Bag Club, because they would take so the guy who started it, he was sick one day. His wife gave him my first book to read, and he was like, I don't read this stuff. And she's like, just shut up and read the book. And he loved it. And he started passing it around to his friends because it was about like terrorism and such. Anyway, he wanted to rip the cover off. And she told him if he did that, he would have to leave and not come home. And so he put the book in a brown paper bag to give to his friends. And so they would send me these notes after each book to give me their reviews. And they were like, I didn't think I liked this stuff, but this is a good book. And I'm like, yeah, see? Okay.
Yeah, the surprise that women tell stories that are interesting to people who aren't women is that's familiar. Maya Han, and this is a question that several people have asked, but Maya's the one I landed on when I was looking for it. She wants to know, do you conceive of the whole story first, or are you a pantser, or are you a plotter? Like, do you, and somebody else earlier, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name and I can't find you, but she asked a similar question, so you can come at it either way. Like, when did you know what the end would be? Were you marching toward that, or did it happen organically?
So I do a synopsis where I give myself the structure of the book, and I know how it needs to end. I don't know how it will end. And then I am a plotter in that I lay out every single chapter on a note card, on a storyboard, because in suspense and in thrillers, you need to be able, you want to make it people unable to put it down. And so I write to connect each chapter so that by the time you get to the end of a chapter, I have solved the problem of that chapter, but created a new problem, which is why you were like, I'm just gonna read one more page. If I've done my job, you need to read one more page every single chapter. And so I laid that out. But to Emily's question from the very beginning, I don't always know what's going to happen. And so somewhere along the way, something I've thought about, something a character has done changes a bit of it. And so I have to adapt. And I know that I know my thematic goal at the end, but I don't actually know who's going to do what. I just have, I'm hoping I know, and sometimes I'm right and sometimes they surprise me.
Well, I'm very, very sad to say that we are almost out of time. I'm going to give you guys one more minute. If anybody has one vital short question, most of these that are left are pretty big picture things, but if you can get it in there in the next minute, I will ask her. But we have multiple people who want to know, like, who are the people that you read that have really inspired you as a writer and helped shape your voice?
I read so broadly, so I'll give you some of the things I love to read. And I never give an exhaustive list because I'm always going to leave someone out that I think is great. I love Octavia Butler. I think she is just such an imaginative writer.
Me too.
Alice Munro writes short stories, and she, in such a small amount of words, can pack in so much pathos and emotion and humanity. In the New York Times, I mentioned I love Robertson Davies. He's a Canadian author who is just fantastic. I love Colson Whitehead because he loves words and he knows how to tell complex and jarring stories in really just different ways. I'm going to butcher his last name, but Haruki Murakami, the author of the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, he does this sort of fantastical, magical storytelling that is also grounded in the deepest and most thoughtful questions of history. And so that's like a range of the writers I love to read. Right now I'm reading Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, and I'm reading The Coldest Winter by David Halberstam. So anyway, that just gives you a few of the readers, a few of the writers I like. But I love writers who like people, who like to tell stories about them, who like to tell stories to them, and who respect the people who are reading their work. The most annoying writers to me are the ones who are so arrogant that they write the story purely for themselves. And as a writer, you need to love what you do. But if you're writing to alienate your audience because they're just not smart enough or clever enough to be a reader of your work, then, mazel tov, I'll find somebody else to read.
Stacey, thank you so much for spending this hour with us. And thank Karis Books, who still has a few copies left, I think, of I went the wrong way. While Justice Sleeps. And also, I'm sure they are happy to hook you up with any of Stacey's other books written under Selena Montgomery or Stacey Abrams or her nonfiction. Our Time Is Now and Lead from the Outside. So that's where you should get them from, is Karis. And Stacey, what a pleasure this has been for me.
Joshilyn, this is amazing. And I just thank you. And I thank everyone for having me here. And thank you to the Decatur Book Festival and Georgia Book World and Karis Books and just everyone for buying the book and liking me enough to come and hang out. So thank you.
Our great pleasure. If you're not busy next week.
I got it wrong. Georgia Center for the Book.
Yes, Georgia Center for the Book, Decatur Book Festival, and Karis Books, all in partnership to bring Stacey Abrams here tonight. Next week, I'll be talking with Rochelle Ehlers about The Beach House and perennial favorite Mary Kay Andrews with The Newcomer, which I can't find my copy of it. I think my daughter has stolen it, but it has sharks on it swimming around. And Stacey, this is a really good book. I just finished this one if you're looking for a good beach read. All right. Thank you, guys. I hope to see you next week. Thank you so much, Stacey.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye.